Welcome to Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio with author, speaker, and your host, Pat Rouleau.
Serving you a generous helping of everything you need to know to help you and your loved ones stay safe during any doctor or hospital visit.
The program is not intended to replace medical advice from a licensed professional, but rather to encourage you to become a well-informed participant in your health and well-being. And now, your host, Pat Rouleau.
You know, they used to wonder, why does it take so long for antidepressants to work? Give somebody, say, Prozac, and within hours, their serotonin levels are very high, but there's no change in mood for 3, 4, 5 weeks. So it turns out that's how long it takes for new brain cells to come online. There's just, in many different directions, the whole serotonin deficiency theory has been undercut and isn't really believed by hardly anybody now except marketing people and drug companies and most of the public, unfortunately, most psychiatrists even.
Hello and welcome. I'm Pat Rouleau, your hostess, and you just heard a snippet from today's guest. Here to talk about some brain myths and how to improve your health and your life by paying attention to your brain. So that's coming up in a bit. I hope you had a fantastic week. I did, and I'm excited to be back with you because I have some unusual and secret codes to share with you. How often does that happen? So let's get ready for that as you take a moment to get in a comfy position, kick off your shoes, and turn off that darned radiation-emitting cell phone for a bit and give your brain a break. That's right, turn it off. No one is going to call or text you with the kind of information I'm about to spill, because right now it's time for the healthcare hazard of the week. Cracking the codes. Did you know that hospitals use secret codes to pass information between the staff? These are meant to be a secret as they don't want to alarm the patients, the families, and visitors. Perhaps you've heard some of these types of codes while shopping in places like, say, Walmart. Code C means customer assistance needed. Code C in housewares. Code C in housewares. In hospitals, for example, often code red stands for fire. Code blue for an adult medical emergency. Code white for a pediatric medical emergency. Code pink for infant abduction. Code purple for child abduction, yellow for bomb threat, code gray for a combative person, silver for a person with a weapon and or a hostage situation, code orange for a hazardous material spill release, and so on. In some hospitals, code black is for a bomb threat and code yellow is for a lockdown. In Ohio, I've heard that code gray is severe weather and code violet is a violent combative patient. Maybe because violet and violent are similar words? Dr. Brown is a code word often used in hospitals to alert security staff to a threat to personnel. If a doctor or nurse is in danger from a violent patient or a non-staff member, they can page Dr. Brown to their location and the security staff will rush to their aid. Hopefully there's not a bunch of Dr. Browns in the hospital. Some hospitals use Dr. Strong or Dr. Heavy. And in some facilities, code brown means someone didn't make it to the bathroom in time, if you get what I mean. Now, for some odd reason, these codes are not nationally universal, meaning one code may mean one thing in Hospital A and another in Hospital B. Heaven help the doctor who may travel between hospitals and get all confused with the various color combinations. Well, what caused me to get so colorful with this topic is an article by an upcoming guest, Stephen Wilkins, a former hospital executive who writes a very interesting blog called Mind the Gap. And I thought it would be of interest to you. It's titled, Why Can't Patients Call a Code Gray on Disrespectful Hospital Staff? He says, if you have ever been in a hospital or watched a TV show about hospitals, you have no doubt heard an emergency page being called over a loudspeaker. Having a recent stay in hospital 24/7 with my sick wife for the last 3 weeks, I am amazed at the variety of codes. There are shock alerts, brain attacks, and code blues with and without doctors present. But my all-time favorite is the code gray. A code gray is called by a hospital staff on unruly or combative patients, family, or visitors. Turns out I happen to know a bit about code gray, he says. Not too long ago, an employee of the hospital where my wife was having a CT scan called a code gray on me while I was waiting for my wife. The manager of a room in the hospital I wrote about in an earlier blog, called The Scariest Place in the Hospital, found out that I wrote the piece that evidently got her in hot water and decided on getting some payback on me. It was a very embarrassing experience for everyone involved. I was embarrassed when, like out of a Frankenstein movie, the angry villagers, the hospital staff, and the local law enforcement descended upon me with pitchforks and torches. The manager of The Scariest Place kept demanding that I stop writing about them using my laptop, and security should call a code gray. I needed to be expelled from the hospital immediately. It was embarrassing for my very sick wife, who was wheeled out of radiology to see the assembled masses calling me to be forcibly removed from the hospital. Most of all, it was embarrassing for the hospital, who days later apologized for the unfortunate incident and rescinded the criminal trespass warrant filed by the hospital against me. Since that experience, I found myself staying 24/7 with my wife in another hospital in the city where we live. And I was amazed at the number of code grays that were being called. One was even called on a patient a few doors down from my wife. I can't help but admit that deep inside I was secretly cheering for the patient. Now I realize that the code gray is intended to protect the hospital staff, but as I discovered, it is always used by some to threaten patients and family and visitors who hospital employees do not feel are behaving as they should. Which leads me to the point of this piece. Patients and their family members should be able to call a code against hospital employees, including physicians, displaying stupidity, rudeness, disrespect, and surliness. There were any number of times during my wife's most recent hospital stay where I wanted to tell off the nurses who felt compelled to disrespect my wife's request to close her patient door upon entry. You see, my wife is frail and preferred to keep the room warm, and hospitals, after all, are very cold places. One nurse told her, "I will close the door when I'm ready. I need to do her vitals and give her medications first." I wish I could have been able to have the hospital operator call a code-insensitive employee in room 515. Or take the doctor, who would sneak into my wife's hospital room at 5:30 a.m., wake my sleeping wife and me, and ask how she's feeling. My God, where's my right to call a code bad experience in room 515? While I am on this subject, why can't hospitals provide interactive patient satisfaction surveys and code buttons via the patient TV channels or in room iPads, instead of forcing you to request a form from the staff before they can file a complaint? And another one of my favorite experiences was when my wife would ask for her lab test results, only to be told that it was against hospital policy to actually give patients a hard copy of such information. The charge nurse had to authorize such requests, and if patients wanted their lab results in writing, they needed to go to the medical records. They weren't on my wife's patient portal yet, since the doctor had not seen them yet. Time for a code, "Why can't I get my own damn data?" You get my point. Now don't get me wrong. I know hospitals are busy places. I know nurses and doctors are busy. Heck, my wife is an RN herself and worked in that same hospital. But frankly, this hospital, and others just like it around the country, pay too much lip service to patient-centered care and patient experiences. Hospital administrators, of which I was once one, should be forced to stay overnight in the hospital for a week just to shadow the experiences of sick patients. Rounding just doesn't provide the same level of experience as having to endure an overnight stay in a hospital. One can't help but feel that the patients and their family are viewed by some hospitals and their employees as the enemy. Otherwise, why would the onerous practices described above, and many others which I could cite, be allowed to happen? Hospitals and their employees are paid to serve patients, not to ignore, disrespect, or treat them like stupid children. Hospitals are lucky that most patients are either too sick or too afraid of retribution from hospital employees to complain too much. I contend that this fear of retribution, juxtaposed by the fact that there are also a lot of really great people working in hospitals that keep most patients from saying nasty things about their hospital stay. But let's face it, one rotten apple can and often does spoil the entire patient experience. But most patients are way too patient to say anything negative. Until patients feel free to express their honest opinions about hospitals, I stand by my earlier suggestion. Let patients and their families have the right to call a code for untoward staff and physician behavior. Now it's me talking. So what do you think of that idea? Should there be a special code for patients? A bell to ring, an alarm to pull? Do we as patients need a code fuchsia, code tickle me pink, code burnt sienna, code raw umber? Oh, that reminds me. We now have a brand new link on our site, and it's called Your Patient Experience, where we're going to showcase anyone's and everyone's experience, good or bad. And I would love for you to share your healthcare or hospital experience with me in writing. Just send us your story or your thoughts about your experience as a patient, a family member, or an advocate, and we will share it on our website as a way to identify trends, to vent, compliment, suggest solutions, and hopefully make positive changes. Now, there are only a few rules. First, do not name specific hospitals or people. We are not about bashing specifics. We're more about telling the stories. Instead, use Hospital A or Rehab B or Assisted Living Home C, or use Dr. Danger or Nurse Nice or something similar. Next, indicate if you'd like us to use your real name and city, or if you'd prefer to be anonymous. Either way is fine with us. We will not edit or make any changes to your submission, and all you have to do is email your story to me at pat@speakupandstayalive.com. pat@speakupandstayalive.com. And let me know your favorite color code. And stay with me, as later in the show, I have a shocking hospital code to share with you that will stop you in your tracks. You probably don't know about this, but your life may depend upon it. Don't miss it. And with that, let's hear some legal news you can use. Let's spend the next 2 minutes with our friends at Schraff & King. They always have the answers. Well, Pat, John from Akron writes, I'm confused. What do you mean by advanced planning? What documents are involved?
First of all, advanced planning is considering what you want to have happen in the event you have a healthcare crisis. So you're in a position where you're not going to be making the decisions, so who will be making those decisions? The documents that are used are a healthcare power of attorney, possibly a living will, a healthcare privacy release, or what's called a HIPAA release, possibly an organ donor designation, will be part of your advanced healthcare planning documents.
And if our listeners need more information, where can they find you?
Well, they can reach us at 440-585-1600, 440-585-1600, or at our website at schraffking.com.
Well, thanks for helping us today, Pat. We appreciate your wisdom.
You're welcome.
If you have not taken care of your advance directives, get it done today. Schraff & King. Visit them online at schraffking.com. This message is for healthcare providers and hospitals. Wouldn't you love to improve your patient satisfaction survey scores? And is it always a poor experience that causes a negative survey? Or could it be patient frustration when patients or family members feel they have no easy way to voice their immediate concerns and are forced to air it after the fact on a written survey form? So why not offer a feedback system in real time that allows both you and the patient to address and resolve problems in the moment? Benchmarking Group International has the solution, the Patient Angle, a software solution that offers real-time delivery of patient feedback, and that includes compliments too. See it for yourself and request a complimentary, no-obligation 30-minute demonstration. Visit benchgroupint.com. That's benchgroupint.com, or call 703-688-2860. That's 703-688-2860.
Tired of the same old presentations?
Can you forward to slide 38, please?
Are you looking for a new, out-of-the-box topic for your next event?
Want your group to leave inspired, informed, and satisfied?
No PowerPoint presentations and dim lights here. No snoring or snoozing goes on during Pat's presentations. To help your entire group, organization, business, or church stay safe during any healthcare or hospital experience, invite Pat to speak. Pick a topic from her website or request your own. Visit her website, speakupandstayalive.com, or call Pat to discuss how she can make your next event fun, enlightening, and life-saving.
Want testimonials?
Go to the bulletin board link at the website for color pictures and comments from real people. Again, it's speakupandstayalive.com or call 440-725-5462. That's 440-725-5462.
You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive Patient Safety Radio, and I am your hostess, Pat Rulo. Always on the lookout for a guest and a topic you won't find anywhere else. And today, my guest found me. And I was quite interested in his topic about how to unleash our brain's potential. And so I asked him to send me a copy of his book, which he so kindly and promptly sent. Now, I read it all in one sitting, and now the book is underlined and page bent, and it's sitting here next to me as I speak. And I want to tell you just a little bit about him. He is Dr. Brant Cortright, a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at California Institute of Integral Studies. His consulting practice specializes in cutting-edge brain health and neuroscience-informed depth therapy. He is the author of several books, and we are going to discuss his newest book today, and the title is The Neurogenesis Diet and Lifestyle, Upgrade Your Brain, Upgrade Your Life. And he has some good news about our brains, so let's pick his and begin. Welcome to the show, Brant.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure, for sure. Now, today, I would like to bust some brain myths that I'm sure most of us believe, and actually we were taught to believe. But before we do, perhaps maybe in just a sentence or two, and I know that's a huge undertaking, define neurogenesis. It's a big word.
Yeah, neurogenesis is the process of making new brain cells. It's how the brain generates new brain cells.
Okay, so that's pretty simple, neurogenesis. Let's begin now with myth number 1. And that myth is that your brain stops growing in your early 20s, and after that you only lose brain cells. I think I learned that as a child growing up, so tell us why that is not a myth.
That's right. That was believed to be the gospel truth, according to neuroscience, up until the late 1990s, just 16, 17 years ago. It was finally shown that that is actually not the case, that the brain makes new brain cells throughout our entire lifespan. Now, there's a slowdown in the rate at which it makes new brain cells in middle age and a plateau. And then there's a further decline in old age. But it turns out these declines don't even necessarily need to happen. But it's clearly not true that what neuroscience believed and what we were all taught, that our brain just stops making new brain cells in our early 20s.
All right, and we're going to delve into that a little deeper, but we've got another myth, number 2. Aging means cognitive decline and memory loss, and after middle age, life is just one gradual downhill slide into decrepitude.
That's right. So it turns out that there's a number of cognitive abilities which actually don't even peak until our 40s or 50s or sometimes even 60s. Some parts of the brain don't even fully myelinate until then. And although there are certain things like reaction time, which tend to fall off as we age, there are other things that don't even come fully online until later in life. So we want our fighter pilots to be in their 20s, but we want our leaders to be thoughtful and to be in their 40s and 50s and 60s and on up.
Okay, that makes good sense. Now, there's another myth that all people form new brain cells at the same rate.
Yeah, that's right. That it turns out there's huge variation in how quickly people make new brain cells. And so the rate of neurogenesis for most people is well below what it could be. And people who are depressed, stressed, anxious have generally even much lower rates of neurogenesis. And people who are thriving generally have higher rates of neurogenesis. So there's big variation.
Okay, so we're kind of in charge of that ourselves, aren't we?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And we've got another myth, number 4, that your genes determine how you and how long your brain stays sharp.
Yeah, there's clearly a genetic loading to this, but it looks like genetics is probably more like 10 or 20% of it. Almost everything we do is related to our lifestyle. Even the genes that we express through a process of epigenetics is determined by our lifestyle. So it's very much in our own hands.
So if a parent or two has Alzheimer's, that's not necessarily a diagnosis for us in the future. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And it turns out that it's looking more and more like Alzheimer's is a lifestyle disease, not an inevitable sentence as we get older. And it's a huge problem, and it's getting worse.
It is. It is. Maybe we can touch on that a little bit later if we remember to get there. And I've got another myth, depression. I thought this was interesting. Depression is a biological illness caused by low serotonin levels, and it requires lifetime serotonin antidepressant drugs to treat it.
That's right. There has been this belief in serotonin deficiency as an explanation for depression for a few decades now, ever since they discovered the SSRI. But it turns out it's really not true. There's about 20 different neurotransmitters involved in mood regulation. There's also a number of hormones and peptides, and there's this extraordinarily complex conversation that they all have. It was always an oversimplified view of the brain to think that one neurotransmitter, serotonin, was responsible for depression. It turns out that people who are depressed, most studies show that they have average or even higher than normal levels of serotonin. There's a few studies that show they have lower amounts, but most of them show average or even higher. It turns out that the key with depression is your rate of neurogenesis. The low rates of neurogenesis tend to bring about cognitive decline, memory problems, anxiety, stress, and depression. And what the SSRIs do, what the antidepressants do, is they increase our rate of neurogenesis. And they do this by flooding the brain with serotonin. Well, there's lots of ways of increasing neurogenesis that don't have these side effects, because antidepressants also have a lot of unfortunate side effects, such as loss of sex drive, loss of libido for most people, which is depressing in itself. And they're also effective in less than 50% of the people who take them. And it turns out that the pharmaceutical companies know that it's actually the rate of neurogenesis that as that increases, that the depression will less. It's not actually this serotonin deficiency that is plugged up. The pharmaceutical companies know this quite well, but it's a $15 billion a year industry.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people riding that gravy train who just want to sell more product. But it turns out there's a lot of natural things you can do to increase neurogenesis right now for free or for very little. You know, they used to wonder, why does it take so long for antidepressants to work? Because you give somebody, say, Prozac, and within hours, their serotonin levels are very high, but there's no change in mood for 3, 4, 5 weeks. Well, it turns out that's how long it takes for new brain cells to come online. So there's just, in many different directions, the whole serotonin deficiency theory has been undercut and isn't really believed by hardly anybody now, except marketing people and drug companies and most of the public, unfortunately, and most psychiatrists even.
Yeah. So I think it would be safe to say that those listening that are on any kind of antidepressants, some of the solutions we have today, and definitely your book, would point them in a great direction where they might be able to do some of this naturally and get off of these drugs that have some of those horrible side effects. So let's head that direction, because you include a chapter on foods, and there are certain foods that promote neurogenesis, and that eating more of these sounds to me like a very simple way to enhance our brains without doing too much work. So if you would, share some of those foods with us.
Yeah, so I think of this as really a two-pronged strategy. We need to do the things that increase our rate of neurogenesis, and we need to stop doing things that lowers our rate of neurogenesis. So there are lots of foods and nutrients that raise our rate of neurogenesis. There are also lots of foods that are quite common that lower our rate of neurogenesis. So we want to do both. 2/3 of the brain is made up of fat. And of that fat, 1/3 of it is DHA. DHA is one of the omega-3 fatty acids, fish from algae. And increasing your rate of omega-3s and the amount of omega-3 that you consume, whether it's through eating fish or through supplements, can have an astonishing effect on the health of your brain. The brain just begins to explode with new brain cells when you start taking higher amounts of omega-3 fatty acids. So that is really a big one. And you get this from fish, particularly like northern cold fish, wild-caught salmon. You want it wild-caught, if at all possible, because what you don't want is the mercury that comes with many types of fish. Mercury is one of the most potent neurotoxins that we know of. It seems to be second only to plutonium, how toxic it is to brain cells. So if you get it through your fish, you want wild-caught. And if you get it through supplements, you want your supplement to be molecularly distilled. Okay. So it takes out all the mercury. You know, they did this one study that showed that people who ate fish 1 to 3 times a week had 14% more gray matter in their brain. That's a significantly bigger brain. When it comes to the brain, size matters. We want a bigger brain. So eating fish can be really beneficial unless it's fried fish. When they looked at those people that ate fried fish, they found no difference in brain volume. So the fats, good healthy fats, are non-oxidized fats. So cooking with vegetable oil, for example, oxidizes fats all over the place. So we want good healthy fats, avocados, nuts, grass-fed meats. Coconut oil is fantastic. Cooking with butter or ghee or coconut oil. The brain thrives on these. You know, we've all been sold for the past 50 years on a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. And it turns out that is about the most neurotoxic diet you can think of. You can track almost perfectly rates of cognitive decline and blood sugar levels. They correlate almost perfectly. So we want to cut down on sugar, cut down on carbohydrates, have good protein, good moderate protein, and eat mostly vegetables, fresh and cooked vegetables, as well as good pasture-raised meats, chicken, eggs, dairy. These have a good high omega-3 ratio and are good fats for the brain, good fats for the whole body. This myth is finally starting to get dispelled that eating fat makes you fat. It doesn't. It's excess carbohydrates that make people fat.
Let's talk about the body for a moment. And we've got all of these big corporations and companies in bed together, big pharma and even big telecom. And I was actually frightened and heartened by your statement that touch, simply touching people and being touched, stimulates neurogenesis. Yet, and you make this quite clear as you so sadly state, one of the most wrenching sights in modern life is a crying baby in a stroller reaching out to its mother while the oblivious mother is busy on her cell phone, texting or playing a game. And so much for the slogan, reach out and touch someone. So let's go there, because I think that's just a real sign of our times today. People are supposedly communicating more, but really no one is communicating and no one is touching. What effects does big telecom have on this situation then? You put your finger on something which I think is huge. That's right, with social media and all that. In some ways, we are more in touch than ever, but it's also a more disembodied kind of being in touch, not physical touch. You know, monkeys and primates, they spend a lot of time touching each other, grooming each other, hugging each other. We were born to be in physical contact with each other, and we've become a kind of touch-phobic society. Unless you're lovers or unless it's a child, it's like it's taboo. Yeah. But yet, the brain needs touch, and when we don't get enough touch, rates of neurogenesis go down, and when we do get enough touch, the brain just begins to smile and to love that.
kind of substitutes for real touch via our phone, I think it's having effects that we don't really know. I mean, they're looking at how it's changing attention spans, and that seems pretty significant.
Yep.
But what it's also doing to just our basic sense of feeling okay in ourselves. We all need lots of reassurance, we need lots of love, we need lots of support. And some of that just comes by a friend putting a reassuring hand on our shoulder, or just giving our spouse or friend a hug. Rates of neurogenesis and neurotransmitters associated with increasing neurogenesis rates go up with just a few minutes of touch, a few minutes of holding hands.
Does it have to be with humans, or what about pets?
Good question. Petting a dog for 5 minutes increases the oxytocin levels in both the dog and the human. And increased oxytocin rates are stimulating of neurogenesis. So that's right. A pet can be a godsend, particularly if a person is somewhat isolated.
Yes.
A pet can be a fabulous way to make up for that.
Excellent. I'm going to go pet my cat after this interview. Now I want to carry this to another step. You also say that most neurogenesis occurs during sleep. And as I was reading that, I was thinking, yet once again, people are sleeping in a bedroom filled with high levels of electromagnetic fields, and they don't even know it, and then they wonder why they don't sleep well and they don't feel refreshed, because EMF exposure caused by cell phones under their pillows, wireless computer routers in the bedroom, cell chargers, cordless phones, alarm clocks, and the bedroom is like an electronics store. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. You've enumerated a number of those things, and also even watching your computer or your cell phone or your iPad before going to sleep increases the blue frequency of the spectrum, which lowers your melatonin and also interferes with sleep. So one of the things I realized in researching this book is that sleep is one of the most underestimated causes of health that I know of. But there's more and more research out now to show that sleep has a huge impact on our immune system and on our brain, on our rate of neurogenesis. That when we don't get enough sleep, we not only lower our rate of neurogenesis, but we also increase the toxic load in our brain. They never knew how the brain cleaned itself from all the toxins that build up during the day, because the lymph system doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. But they discovered this new system called the lymphatic system, after the glial cells, which do a lot of the housekeeping in the brain. So just about all of us need 7 or 8 hours of sleep. Some people can get by on 6, but less than that, you're almost surely hurting your brain, lowering your immunity, opening the door to cognitive decline. The brain needs a good night's sleep. So good sleep hygiene, staying away from those blue frequencies before going to bed, and being in a darkened room, and clearing out all the electromagnetic interference if possible.
Yeah. We talk about that frequently on the show. I really try to stress that the bedroom should be a sanctuary. I mean, just get the stuff out of the bedroom. As you say, make it dark. Because it's not 6 or 7 hours of sleep. It's got to be 6 or 7 quality hours of sleep, which you can't do with all of this clatter and smog going on in your bedroom. I didn't plan on talking about this, but you mentioned the blood-brain barrier. And I've done a lot of research and doing a lot of interviews with folks on the negative effects of cell phones, and how just a few moments of using a cell phone next to your head actually opens up the blood-brain barrier, which then will allow the toxins in the environment or within your body to reach the brain. What are your thoughts on that?
I can certainly believe that. I try to keep my cell phone as far away from my brain as possible. Yeah. No, that's great that you're getting that information out, because there's such vast resources trying to put out the idea that cell phones are completely innocuous, so the message doesn't get out so much.
Let's talk a bit about relationships, both negative and positive ones. I think just inherently we know we don't feel well when we're surrounded by negative people or we've got negative relationships, but how does that affect our brain and neurogenesis?
Yeah, good question. So our emotional state is hugely determined by our relationships. The quality of our relationships has a big effect on the quality of our brain. So stressful relationships, relationships where we feel anxious, scared, intimidated, or relationships where there's a lot of anger and resentment or coldness or rejection, it turns out these are very damaging to the brain. They slow down neurogenesis. They create stress and stress hormones in the body, which actually shrinks the brain. So we need a certain amount of stress. In fact, we don't want to have a stress-free life. It's not the stress is the problem. It's chronic stress. So we need good stress, short-term, moderate stress. But chronic stress or high amount of stress is very damaging to the brain, and the rates of neurogenesis plummet. Really bad news for the brain. The brain thrives, on the other hand, on loving relationships, supportive relationships, relationships where we feel safe, seen, appreciated, affirmed. These kind of relationships increase the neurotransmitters that stimulate neurogenesis.
Yeah. Well, now I know there's so much more to cover, so I'd like to invite you to come back next week so we can continue this conversation and especially focus on how to increase neurogenesis by not slowing it down. And apparently there are 4 poisons that get in the way, and maybe we can talk about those next time?
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
Well, now until then,
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Where can folks go, though, to find out more about you, your work, and where can we purchase the book, The Neurogenesis Diet and Lifestyle?
Okay, well, it's available on Amazon, or you can get it through any bookstore. And my website is www.brantcortright.com, and there's a link to the book there as well.
All right, and I will post that on our site, Speak Up and Stay Alive, as well, along with this interview, so folks can hit that as well. Wow, well, we learned a lot about our brains today. We busted some myths, and we realized that enhancing neurogenesis is a lifestyle, and that a neurogenic diet and lifestyle promotes neurogenesis. So to make the most of our lives, we need to make the most of our brains. And I thank you so much, Brant, for finding me and suggesting that I learn and share neurogenesis with my audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Have fun this summer at the newly renovated Pioneer Waterland and Dry Fun Park. Wet or dry, there's so much to do. 6-story high water slides, lazy inner tube ride, paddle boats, a Grand Prix go-kart track, batting cages, miniature golf, fun zone game arcade, and you'll appreciate the sparkling new bathrooms too. Enjoy the picnic tables and grills or the Splash Landing Eatery. Fun for all ages at Pioneer Waterland and Dry Fun Park, Kyle Road in Chardon, Ohio. For more information, visit pioneerwaterland.com. Well, as promised, we are about to continue our quest to become code crackers. No codes, slow codes, and show codes. While researching hospital color codes, I came upon this little-known code called the slow code, or the show code, or the Hollywood code, the light blue code, the partial code. And it refers to the practice in a hospital or other medical center to purposely respond slowly or incompletely to a patient in cardiac arrest, particularly in situations where CPR is of no medical benefit or where a medical response is medically futile, but it's faked for the comfort of the patient's family and loved ones. Slow codes and show codes are forms of symbolic resuscitation. A slow code is an act performed by the healthcare providers that resembles CPR, yet is not the full effort of resuscitation, while a show code is a short and vigorous resuscitation performed to benefit the family while minimizing harm to the patient. Sometimes a patient with severe dementia or a terminal disease such as cancer goes into cardiac arrest. The doctors think that resuscitation would be useless, that an aggressive intervention would provide only a temporary reprieve or perhaps more suffering. And when the patient or his or her representative has not provided a do not resuscitate order, that is when doctors and staff may call a code, but they'll respond slowly. And this refers specifically to CPR and the do not resuscitate form known as the DNR. CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and CPR uses mouth-to-mouth or machine breathing and chest compressions to restore the work of the heart and the lungs when someone's heart or breathing is stopped. It is an emergency rescue technique that was developed to save the life of people who are generally in good health. Advanced CPR offers additional interventions which can include intubation, which is the insertion of a tube into the mouth or nose to help with breathing, mechanical ventilation, which is the use of a machine to move air into the lungs, medications given through a vein, drugs can help with blood pressure regulation, heart rhythm, and blood flow, and cardioversion, the use of a controlled electric shock to change heart rhythm. Now, your choice of code status is not included in your living will or any of your other advanced medical directives. It refers only to resuscitation. Unlike other advanced directives that are written and signed by you as the individual, such as the living will or the durable power of attorney for healthcare, a DNR, the Do Not Resuscitate Order, must be completed and signed by the doctor or other healthcare provider, such as a hospice nurse practitioner. Once completed, that DNR order is added to your medical record. So DNR, or a no code, does not mean do not treat. You are not saying that you don't want everything that can be done if you have a DNR order in place. You may want other life-sustaining treatments, just not CPR. The only thing that a DNR order means is that if you suffer a cardiac arrest, you are not to have CPR, and that is valid for that particular hospital admission. Now, I read this sad piece at allnurses.com that highlights what I'm saying here. It was under the heading of Great Nursing Issues on Patient Safety, called The Slow Code by The Commuter, a senior moderator, December 5th, 2012. This person writes, I've been a nurse for only 7 years. However, certain events and situations will remain embedded in my memory for the rest of my life. One of those events took place during my first year of nursing practice when I was employed at a long-term care facility. A code blue was announced through the overhead paging system, along with the room number. Since the facility had no designated code team, any healthcare employee who were located nearby were expected to respond. I dutifully ran to the room and entered a scene that was filled with disorder. An elderly male patient was lying on the floor adjacent to his bed in a supine position. His body was cyanotic but still warm. His nurse states that he has been chatting with him less than 30 minutes ago. No rise and fall of his chest was noted. All pulses were absent. This clinically dead man was a full code, yet the multiple people in the room were moving with a disturbingly unhurried pace. I immediately started chest compressions. A nurse with more than 20 years of experience glanced at me with a smile and said sternly, "Give it up. Don't waste your energy. Wait until the EMS gets here, then act as if you're doing something in front of them." She ended her statement with a quiet giggle as the house supervisor stood over me, grinned, and nodded in agreement. I continued pounding on the man's chest and could feel his osteoporotic ribs cracking with each compression. EMS personnel and the city fire rescue squads arrived less than 10 minutes later to take over the resuscitation efforts. Approximately 30 seconds before the EMS staff entered the room, my coworkers began putting on the show and pretended to exert an all-out effort to save the patient, aka the show code or the Hollywood code. Since EMS has their own documentation, I suppose my peers wanted to appear busy to avoid potential liability later down the line. There was a bit more to that, but that's the end of what I'm going to read that this nurse wrote. So I have to ask, do situations arise where a slow code would ever be justified? Are slow codes ethical? What if the patient was being kept alive by technology alone? As a moral decision, should he or she be allowed to die? Or what if the chronic disease the patient suffered from was beyond the resources of internal medicine and the use of technology to prolong the patient's life was a waste of time and effort? Or what if the patient specifically requested no such intervention? Shouldn't the patient decide how she or he wants to live or die? Then again, if the patient has decided that he or she wants everything done, the hospital staff should fulfill that request. Obviously, lots of moral, ethical, and legal ramifications to the slow code. If a slow code or a show code is performed, is that documented in the patient's chart? Also a note that some hospitals have policies stating that do not resuscitate patients are not to be admitted to the intensive care units. More than likely, you would not be told of this policy, and the patient is sent to a floor with a lower level of care. And in order to be treated, you would need to be moved to a hospital that has no such policy. So I guess we should ask your physician about the policies at your local hospitals. And let me throw this into the mix, the chemical code. A chemical code means that a patient wants to be treated with medications only. In some hospitals, this means that no other procedures, CPR, insertion of tubes, invasive procedures, or other therapies are to be used. But the problem with this approach is that most medications cannot be given to the patient effectively without using these two procedures. So it sounds like there's just so much confusion about these slow codes, no codes, show codes, Hollywood codes. Slow codes point to two failures. One is a failure on the part of the medical staff to communicate with the family and the patient. Every doctor or nurse should ask the patient right up front about their current wishes for CPR and execute a DNR form. And for heaven's sakes, explain it well. Don't just ask, do you have a DNR? Who knows what that means? Most people do not know that it only refers to CPR. Have the conversation with both the patient and the family members so no one has to play God. And the second failure is a failure on your part as the patient not to have educated yourself and your family about your wishes for end-of-life care. Slow code stresses the need for you to have a conversation based on a sound understanding of care choices and the realities that you may face at the end of life. Remember, the DNR orders, the do not resuscitate orders, are a physician's order. The physician must be involved to write it and change it. And the health personnel can only follow a DNR order if they know one exists. So therefore, it's important to notify your doctors, nurses, caregivers, and family members if you prefer to avoid CPR. Today's conversation about slow codes clearly indicates the need for more and better end-of-life conversations between ourselves, family members, and healthcare providers. Why allow someone else to make this final decision for you? Talk about the slow code or the Hollywood code today. Slow code is an element of end-of-life care in this country. The public is largely unaware of the practice. It's often imposed upon patients without their consent or knowledge. There are no laws governing it, and research have collected no data. It's like the Wild West. So I have a few suggestions. The first is to have all of your other advanced directives in place, power of attorney for healthcare decisions, your living will, and so on. And if you're in the Cleveland area, please have a consultation with the attorneys at Schraff & King. They've been sponsors of this program almost since the beginning of time, and only because I agree that they can do a good job for you. Don't go it alone. You need people who have the training and background to know the laws and know how to properly execute these important documents for you. Their number is 440-585-1600. 440-585-1600. And finally, unless you'd like your final breath to be likened to a Hollywood production, give this some thought today. Have conversations now and insist upon full disclosure about your diagnosis. Demand informed consent and real understanding between you and your healthcare providers at the very onset of each and every hospital admission. Talk about the do not resuscitate form and your choices. You may not want CPR or chemicals and prefer to pass naturally. That's your choice. You may want all measures taken at all cost. That is also your choice, and no one other than you should be able to make it. No codes, slow codes, and show codes? Now you know. And you heard about it here on Speak Up and Stay Alive. Well, there you have it, a full program today. We cracked some codes and took a peek inside our brains with Dr. Brant Cortright. And remember, he is coming back next week, so I hope you can make it. Same time, same place, but never the same information. We are out of time, but be sure to visit the website to re-listen, if that's a word, re-listen to today's show and to get a copy of the book, Speak Up and Stay Alive, The Patient Advocate Hospital Survival Guide. It is jam-packed with ways to keep you safe during every healthcare or hospital encounter. Just go to speakupandstayalive.com and remember to send me your hospital or healthcare story and we'll post it on the new Your Patient Experience page. And get your advanced directives done this week, talk about the slow code, and I'll see you next week. Until then, I hope you have a healthy and a happy week, free from code gray, Hollywood codes, and shrinking brains. I am Pat Rouleau, and I am your guide to safe and successful healthcare and hospital encounters.
Listen to Pat Rouleau and Speak Up and Stay Alive RadiOh. Stay safe from little-known healthcare and hospital hazards. To learn more, go to speakupandstayalive.com. That's speakupandstayalive.com.
I'm Jerry the Germ with a Speak Up and Stay Alive healthcare safety snippet just for you. Sponsored by the Junction Auto family. People you can trust for your next Buick, Chrysler, Dodge, GMC, or Jeep. US 322 and Ohio 44 since 1931. Visit junctionautofamily.com. If you want to pay more, that's your business. If you want to pay less, that's Junction's business. Here's our expert, Pat Rouleau.
Hey Jerry, did you know that people are talking dirty and don't even know it? Think of cell phones and office telephones. Thanks to you, they're covered with thousands of Jerrys just like you. Thousands of people each year miss time from work thanks to all of this dirty talk. Sanitize your phone daily with a disposable disinfecting wipe and clean your hands every so often with soap and water if possible. Talking dirty isn't nice and it's not healthy. Oh, Jerry, now what are you doing on the bottom of that lady's purse?
Stay safe. Listen to Speak Up and Stay Alive RadiOh every Saturday morning from 9 to 10 here on AM 1220 WHKW. For more information, go to speakupandstayalive.com.